I often say they saved my life.
There was a certain band from Seattle named Pearl Jam.
I've seen 77 shows. They had so many sleepless nights, and so I put their music on. And it was just so comforting. And so, it really did make me feel as if things were going to be okay. Now it's creating a life for me, most importantly, that allows me to be healthier mentally, more present for my kids.
Welcome to the Ill Noise Business Playbook. We sit down with people building real impact in their communities and unpack the vision behind their work. If you care about real stories and real connection, you're in the right place. Let's make some noise.
Hi, welcome to the Ill Noise Business Playbook. We've got Chris here from Walking Tall. Chris, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, Joe. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'm doing very good. And I want to get into all your wonderful stuff that you're doing out here. It's really impressive. But as I was mentioning before we got started, and we'd kind of seen that on Instagram. I think when we were sort of connecting, we'd kind of connected the dots with that. But I'm going to tell you something real quick, Chris, and then I'm going to have you jump in. But in 1992, the very first concert I went to, my friend Randy and I, he was like, hey, let's go to Lollapalooza. It was the very second one they ever had. And the whole reason he wanted to go, and I was intrigued to go, was the Red Hot Chili Peppers were headlining the festival. And of course, Lollapalooza has all these different bands, and Soundgarden was there as well. And my buddy was like locked into that. But there was a certain band from Seattle named Pearl Jam that played that day. And from that day on, and this is, boy, oh boy, I don't do the math here, right? I've been a big fan of Pearl Jam ever since. And I've seen them much less times than you, by the way, but I'm in the 30s. And
amazing.
Every show has been beautiful and wonderful. So I know you're also a Pearl Jam fan. Can you tell me exactly why that is? And
oh my gosh. Yeah. So we could have a whole show about that, Joe. But the truth is, my first show was 98 at Alpine Valley. And
I was there.
I was a young student athlete in high school. And
okay.
I was fortunate enough when I graduated to play college baseball. And so my concert going really dwindled at that point, and then I went on to coach college baseball for a long time. But then when I stopped, I really got back onto the touring scene and just was able to follow Pearl Jam so much. I've seen 77 shows.
Jeez.
And so much of it has changed over the course of my life, over the experiences I've had. So much of the music has really morphed into what the meanings have meant to me. But I often say, and I joke, and it's not facetious in any respect, but I say they saved my life. And I'm sure we'll get into me about being in the mass shooting. But, they really did, because there had so many sleepless nights and so many experiences where I just didn't feel I was relatable or I could really hear or talk to anybody. And so I put their music on. And it was just so comforting. And so, it really did make me feel as if things were going to be okay. And so, but yeah, I've had some great experiences, man. I've been backstage at a few shows. I've been front row, dead center many, many times. I've had some pretty cool experiences. And the best part is, you'll attest, like, while the music's amazing and the shows are all beautiful in their own respect, but like the people you meet on tour and the people you meet at the pre-parties and all the goodness that goes on around the band is just so, so inspiring and just makes them even more captivating.
I'm going to share this with you real quick. So I saw them in 92. It was in the summer. That September, my father passed away. And when I came back from the hospital, I mean this, I'm telling the truth, and all my friends would tell you that I am. But I go home, I go from the hospital. My father had a massive stroke. He was we were going to pull the plug, and he was kind of, going to be taking his last breaths. So my mother kind of said, go home. You said goodbye to your father. I walk upstairs, turn on the radio on Q101, and what song starts playing is Alive.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, I was like, not only do I like this now, like I'm locked in. And I agree, the people that I've met throughout the years, man, it's just been beautiful. I guess hopefully another time I could see you, we could share a little bit more stories with that. I don't want that to be the whole interview.
We have to go to a show together, hopefully, when they get back on the road.
Oh, right. I would love to. I'd love to.
Yeah.
As long as we find out who that new drummer is going to be, right?
Yeah, that's hopefully we get an announcement soon.
Yes, for sure. You have a really compelling story, and I kind of want to, you'd kind of referenced it already, so I do kind of want to get that out there now. If you would be so kind, I know that you something that spearheaded a lot of what you're currently doing right now has to do with the fact that you kind of experienced something rather traumatic, to say the very least. Could you share with the audience a little bit about what that was, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I often say, like, my professional life has been in 10-year increments. I kind of alluded to my first 10 years. I was a college baseball coach. And in Division I world at the University of Iowa in Valparaiso, which was super fun. But after that, 10-year career, I decided to move back home and start a family. And I worked for the Park District of Highland Park. And
Okay.
I worked for that organization for 10 straight years. Part of my role is my responsibilities elevated and my title got bigger. I was the co-chair of the 4th of July parade for 5 years in a row. And as you alluded, backstage, there was a COVID break in there and we had some like wonkiness to some of the logistics of it. But in 22, we resumed the parade. I was the co-chair again. I was on site. And if you may recall, there was a mass shooting that took place.
Yes.
Where a killer opened fire at 10:14 in the morning and took 7 lives, sadly, and shot 48 more. And then I often say, had wounded countless amounts of people mentally, including myself. And so, I would call myself a mass shooting survivor, a mass shooting experience. I don't know how you want to classify me, but unfortunately, it was the worst day of my life. And I was on site for about 8 hours in my role after the shots were fired, just doing some tasks of which I felt necessary. We had some employees of ours through the Park District, because I was working, of course, that were sheltering in place in some strangers' homes. So we had to go find them with some evacuation rescue vehicles. Had to evacuate our public beach. There was just a lot of like chaos going on in the community, as you can imagine. And not only because of the shooting itself, but the killer was on the loose for several hours in the aftermath. And just a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. But, certainly was the worst day of my life. And as you mentioned, it really has catapulted me into the person I am today, doing some of the things I'm doing on many fronts.
I think it's really important what you set out there, and I want people to hear that. Just because you're not physically wounded from a situation, I think we need to always understand that the mental health and the mental destruction that can occur from something like that is something that needs repair. And it's been it's pretty enlightening to know that has sort of spearheaded you into this next chapter of your life. First off, Chris, I'm really sorry to hear that you had to go through that, but I do think that I'm so thankful that you're here to talk about it, and I'm so thankful you're here to actually do and spread all the goodness that you're doing that kind of was spearheaded from being involved with that situation. So thank you for your transparency and your honesty regarding something like that. I think that's it shows a lot of bravery on your end. Let's talk about, and before I got to get a little corny line out of the way. So I'm a big fan of movies that are not Academy Award winning movies, but there's a particular movie with The Rock, and I know you got to know where I'm going with this, called Walking Tall. So is there any correlation between that movie and the decision to name your organization as you have?
No, oddly enough, it's so funny you asked that. So what I come to find out when I was educated by one of our other co-founders, Todd Blyleven, is that there's another movie called Walking Tall that originated in the 60s, if I remember correctly. And so I had no clue any of these movies even existed. I understood that the Rock had a movie called Walking Tall. Didn't even know what it's about, never seen it, frankly. But as Todd and I were bantering back and forth about starting a podcast, a mental health focused podcast where we share relatable stories and
love it
with mental health focus, we didn't have a name. And so I actually still have the text. He, as a matter of fact, outlined like 10 or 15, we can call it this or this or this or this or this. And I saw Walking Tall and I'm like, I kind of like Walking Tall. Let's talk about it. And so really we just kind of picked it off a list he created and it really resonated with the both of us. And it's kind of stuck. And the moniker, the slang or saying, I don't know, walk tall really has just kind of been a fun thing that we've utilized in various arenas and avenues, merchandise, whatever. But yeah, that's really how it's spearheaded. It had nothing to do with The Rock, even though I do like wrestling.
Okay. All right. So as far as what you're doing, then you said you've got a podcast, and I've watched it you've got yourself and a couple folks that are involved with the one that's with mental health. And when did that get off the ground? How long ago?
So
how long have you been doing that?
Well, we started in 23.
Okay.
And so I think we launched in February of 23. We went gangbusters because initially, Joe, our intent was just to be a podcast. We thought that because Todd is also a mass shooting survivor, unfortunately, he was in the Las Vegas incident in 2017.
Goodness.
He has a hero story in many regards. If you don't know it, I highly encourage you to just Google Todd Blyleven. His experience is horrific and he's a hero, and I'll let him tell it himself. But he's had some content and some small documentaries done about his experience. But we met through the game of baseball, and initially we thought, well, we're just going to do a podcast. And he had another initiative that he was working on where he met Dr. LaRosa through baseball as well. And she's one of the top brain doctors. She's a doctor of psychiatry. She's the chair of Long Island University Psychiatric School. I mean, she's the most impressive person I've met in the field of mental health. But nevertheless, we were just going to be a podcast. And so that's how we started. And then as time progressed and as things changed for several of us, and me particularly professionally, so we could grow this into more speaking engagements, workshops, a full-on 501c3 charity. And so I'm happy to say, just in December of last year, so we're 3 months into it, we're finally a 501c3 nonprofit.
That's awesome.
Have started some of our work as recently as the last couple months. In January, I was in Frankfort, Kentucky, working at Kentucky State University. They had a gun-related incident on campus where a man opened fire and unfortunately a life was taken. And it was a very confusing situation and still being debated. But nevertheless, there was trauma involved and it was gun-related. So I went down and had done some work with them and spoke at the Illinois JC's conference in Champaign. So things are moving forward. Our workshops are growing, but we're going to start resuming our podcast again to start getting our word out and spread our message differently now that we have our 501c3. So it's just been a whirlwind, man. So we've been not even 3 full years in, and we're growing.
Where do these workshops typically take place at?
Yeah, so I typically go on site and we'll work with organizations and or teams, individuals, what have you, right? Talking about various things, mental health focus, right? And advocacy being the top of mind. But vulnerability, approachability are 2 things that we believe in wholeheartedly with our movement. But then also talking about teamwork and leadership and community building and team building, right? I think with Todd's, in my experience, particularly, right, having both been in high level athletics in the game of baseball and understanding teamwork and leadership, but having both been in mass shootings and understanding and gaining a perspective on life in such a different regard than maybe others haven't experienced, and being able to utilize those experiences for the benefit of others has really served us well. And really what we're focused on, getting out into areas, all areas, frankly, right? But areas of trauma, helping organizations that have maybe experienced something that we have, using our experiences for good. And then kind of focusing on young student athletes and maybe particularly men, because as we know, right, the mental health statistics as they're related to men in general, but young men are concerning. And so if we could use our experiences and our platform to empower some others, that's what we're there to do as well.
So I did not play college baseball. I played baseball when I was younger. I played a year of semi-pro as an adult.
Fun.
But couple of questions for you here real quick. What position did you play?
Yeah, I was a left-handed pitcher.
Oh, left-handed. Okay, I was a righty.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sure you were much better. And where did that passion come from? One of the first memories I have, and I mentioned that my father passed away when I was 18 years old, but one of the first memories I have is being like 3 to 4 years old on the side of my house, just playing catch with my father. Right? I mean, it's like the line from Field of Dreams, right? Dad, you want to have a catch? Although it should have been, Dad, you want to play catch. I don't know why they said have a catch, but anyways, where did that come from with you, or where did the baseball desire come? And then I have an adjoining question with that. There's a reason I'm asking.
First off, man, I just want to say, I'm so sorry you lost your father at a young age. I can't imagine what that would have been like. My dad is my best friend, and I'm so fortunate to be 40, going on 44. He just turned 70, and
That's
he's
awesome.
alive. And as a matter of fact, Joe, we go to Pearl Jam shows together.
Oh, that is
awesome. My dad's first show was 2016. I took him to Toronto for his 60th birthday.
Nice.
We're big hockey fans. And so we went to the Hockey Hall of Fame. We went to the show. They ended up playing binaural front to back, which is amazing.
Right.
But nevertheless, so I want to just say, man, I'm sure that was impactful to you and has shaped who you've become. So I want to just acknowledge that. But
appreciate you.
My dad was not a baseball guy. He liked to play pickup hockey. So I guess I just liked baseball as a young kid, and it just kind of morphed and grew. And over time, I came to understand I was okay and pretty good. And so it really just stuck with me, right? And so I got a scholarship and played 4 years on scholarship at Iowa. And then I made a career of it for 10 years. So I was very, very lucky because of the game of baseball. And I owe a lot of how I'm doing right now as it relates to my mental health journey to my experience in baseball. I didn't realize at the time that I was gaining so many life skills that I would need later on in life. I often said as a coach, and never really realized until now what it meant, was baseball really teaches you about life, and it helps you build skills to endure life. Because let's face it, whether you're a mass shooting survivor or whether you lost your father at a young age, life is hard, right? Yep. There are things that come at us all the time, and there's things that we have to experience and endure that we're not prepared for, or maybe we're not even built to endure, right? Like our nervous systems weren't designed to experience mass shootings, right? That's
Right.
why the chaos, and that's why I had experiences I did, because it really rewired me in a short period of time. And so there's a lot of things going on, but without baseball, having learned breathing techniques and visualization and being present, all these things that we talk about to be a successful athlete really did transfer to me really getting through some of the trauma I was experiencing.
I find that sports played such a big part of my life as well. I find that people that were involved with sports at all, and again, you've mentioned so many wonderful aspects of it, but it's just anything sports related. In order to do things together, I think it teaches you so much. The team together, everybody achieves more, right? It's just that way in which that you're always rooting for somebody else, and I think it was a great way. It's a great way to meet people from other sides of the road. And it's just a great way for us to meet folks that we would have never met before if we didn't decide to do that. So I think that's really cool. Now, you got to stop saying you were a decent player when you got a 4-year ride. And then you said you had a 10-year career. Did you play after college as well?
No. So I was involved in Division I college baseball from 2000 to 2013. So 13 straight years.
Okay.
Four as a player and 9 as a coach. So when I graduated upon college, I was... When I say I was just an okay player, you got to remember I'm a competitor, right? I compare myself to the guys I'm watching at the World Baseball Classic right now. Like, even though I'm 43, mentally I'm like, I should be Tarek Skubal, right? The Cy Young winner on Detroit, right? Like that's very well. So I'm like, so I'm saying I was a good enough player, right? Like, but yeah, I was very fortunate, and it really just allowed for me to gain so much of who I am today, right? And I just owe a lot to it. I just really do.
That's awesome. What are the best ways that you're kind of getting out to the world what you're doing? Obviously, you're having a podcast and stuff like that, but how are you finding folks to kind of align with you that might be able to reach out for your support or reach out for, the different methods of which that you can become an advocate for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. That's a great question, because there's many ways of which we're reaching out to others, right? But what's been happening as our podcast has grown and as our speeches have really taken shape, or I've been out and doing speaking engagements, right? As you know, in business, right? Referrals and word of mouth are sometimes the best ways to grow your business, to grow your mission, to grow whatever it is you're trying to promote in the world. And I've been very fortunate, and in some respects, unfortunate. I'll use an example.
Please.
I went to Cedar Rapids this past November and spoke at Mount Mercy University, which is an NAIA school, like I said, in Cedar Rapids. And after I got done speaking, there was about 90 people in the room and a young man. And most of my engagements, there's always 1 or 2 people who lurk back and they want to have a conversation and they want to share a story they want to be related to. And I'm happy to do it. And that's my most favorite part in some respects of what it is I do. But a young man was kind of lurking back. And finally I got to him, had a conversation. His first line was, I never thought I'd meet somebody who understands. And I'm like, well, hi, I'm Chris. Who are you? And he says, well, I was in the Perry school shooting in Perry, Iowa. 2 years ago, there was a school shoot. And so I met another mass shooting survivor, right? Most recently from Austin. I was connected. A friend of mine knew somebody whose son was in the nightclub in Austin, Texas 2 weeks ago. If you recall, there was a shooting that took place, right? And so unfortunately, in some respects, because these events are occurring more and more, and because they're becoming more prominent in society, right? Your referral system, your network is getting bigger. And so just being connected and sharing stories with people one-on-one, like I had done with me. You got to remember, Todd and I didn't know each other prior to shooting. He texted me out of the blue 2 days after July 4th, 22, because a friend asked him to say, hey, I know another guy that was in a shooting like you. Can you help him? And that's how we started all this. And so if not Todd being approachable and vulnerable, like we talk about in our movement, who knows where I'd be? And so referrals, word of mouth is fantastic. And then, some of my other work as an auctioneer and fundraising, it goes hand in hand with what our mission is in terms of mental health, right? Because I help raise money for other organizations. And so, we get along well, things go okay. And we talk about both sides of what it is I do, of course. You
said that you just you graduated into a new functionality with your business and stuff. How did that actually, you just said just a couple months ago, you finally kind of flip the switch to that next frontier. Talk about how you finally got to that status.
Yeah, it was a long, arduous process, right? I often joke and say it's easier to get a gun of which you can kill 7 people in less than 30 seconds in America than it is to build a charity. And in some respects, I'm being funny, right? And but I'm attempting to make one think. And what I say through experiences and just getting the proper paperwork filed and having all of that stuff done to just be recognized as a 501c3, right? Where if somebody makes a contribution, they can get a little tax write-off, or we have some different types of parameters of which we can operate. It was confusing, right? I had to have a CPA, a board member of ours, volunteered her time and effort and paid our filing fees because that was expensive in itself, right? But we knew that without that accreditation, without that ability to offset costs to people who need help in the immediate, we might not be able to grow. We might not be able to help as many people, right? And so without that accreditation, we would have had to charge. We would have had to have astronomical cost as a business. And so having that nonprofit status really has allowed us to solicit donations, allowed us to have events. We're just getting ready to start, our first ever fundraiser national activity through March Madness. We're doing a bracket. We're doing a bracket for some prizes where we're, making a suggested donation. Little things like that we wouldn't have been able to do. And so we would have been very limited in the scope of which we can do, because let's face it, none of us are billionaires. We don't have the ability to just meander about the country and do what it is we really want to do. I have 2 children. We all have things that we have to pay for in our lives. And so that thing was, getting our 501c3 status was really instrumental in how we're able to meander about and do things a little differently.
Are 2 young children, is that correct?
Yeah, my daughter Josephine, she's 11, and
I love that name.
Yeah, and my son Lucas is 9, so they're my everything.
I bet. This is a question that I would love to ask you. At what point do you start talking to them about making sure that their mental health is at an appropriate level?
Well, that's already started. Ever since this shooting, and I was very fortunate. I'm no longer married, but at the time my wife and kids weren't present. Right. And so that was in itself maybe the best part of the day, right? Because I would have not wanted that experience to have been put on any of them, nor anybody else, frankly. But, once at the time when I was diagnosed with PTSD, insomnia, anxiety, and depression all at once. Less than a year after the event, after I tried to just hide my symptoms and just was not the person I was prior to. And so once I had these diagnoses, we started to have very small conversations because at various points, my anger outbursts were uncharacteristic, putting it mildly at times. And so little things like that. And so they know Daddy it's so funny, there's kids at the time, PDS, they couldn't even say it right. Sure. Little things like that. And there were times where I would have to explain to them what I was experiencing. However, what those conversations have now turned into, we just took a road trip to Iowa City. Believe it or not, this past weekend, I did an auction there for some friends, but, talking about only controlling what you can control. Or only focusing on your output into the world, maybe don't tell Dad to stop coughing so loud, or, little things like that. And that's kind of mental health focused, because I think that's building the skills that as they get older and they maybe really do have some challenges, hopefully that'll help them persevere. Just like I had those skills instilled in me through baseball and a lot of other things. I just didn't know it yet.
Being an auctioneer, is that how does that stay connected with what you're actually doing itself? And is there a certain amount of words that you have to say per minute to be qualified as an auctioneer?
It's so funny. People are always like, so you can do the na. I'm like, no, that's not the intent. But so I never set out to be an auctioneer. As I mentioned, 10 years in baseball, 10 years in Parks and Rec. One of my other things I started at the Park District, we had a scholarship program to help offset recreational costs for underprivileged families in Highland Park and Highwood. But there was no fundraising mechanism for it. So we were just funding it through tax dollars. And so through my experience in baseball and fundraising, I said, well, let's start a banquet that's athletics focused and we'll raise money to offset the scholarship. And so we did that. And I hired an auctioneer to help raise money the night of every event. And so one day we were backstage and he said, you could do what I do. You're really good on a mic. And I'm like, dude, I got a job. I'm in Parks and Rec. Who needs to be an auctioneer? I got it good, whatever. Right. But lo and behold, less than a year later, I needed a job. And so I called him. His name is Chris Maliszewski. I owe him I'm indebted to him, the utmost gratitude. And he helped me get my license. He helped mentor me. He refers business to me. And that's really how I started becoming an auctioneer, and really how it's aligned is I'm using my skills, my mic skills, some of my talents, my willingness to be outgoing on stage, however you want to call it, to help raise money for great causes, right?
Yeah.
It's doing something that helps uplift other great missions, dog shelters and women's shelters and public schools. And this weekend I'm working an event in Evanston for the Chessmen Club of the North Shore, which is one of the nation's oldest African-American male-run organizations in the country, right? So like all these great organizations, I get to get on stage and have fun and crack jokes and ask people for money and have a lot of fun doing it. And I'm getting paid to go to parties. So like, how can I be upset about that, right?
Right. When did this really, your story is so impactful and so layered and so beautiful. And
thank you.
Before I actually ask this question, I really can't wait for us to kind of put out the clip of just reminding young men in general to really be cognizant of seeking out help if they need to, because I can tell you with confidence too, from working in the not-for-profit sector and having so many young boys that were so resistant to get that support that they actually really needed. So I think that that's something that I really can't wait for us to really get out there for sure. But at what point did this really sort of crystallize and you realize that, not only is this something that I'm passionate about, but this is actually something that I was meant to do. And it just really made sure that you realize, like, I know right now in my life that this is where I need to be. And this is my purpose.
Yeah. Gosh, it's a question I think about often, but I don't think about enough, if that makes any sense, right? Because I think it changes, right?
Sure.
I think as the story evolves, right? If you had asked me that question 6 months ago, a year ago, I would probably given you a different answer, right? Because now I have more information, right? What I would say is it really started probably a year and a half ago when Hail Hail Auctions became a formidable company. And I launched my podcast through that, which I bring on charitable organizations to just create awareness and talk about their event and things of that sort. And people started to ask me to come on, or people started to search me out, and people started to want me to come speak to their organization from the Walking Tall mental health side, right? As opposed to me trying to create opportunities, which we all have to do in some respects, particularly at the onset of a business or a nonprofit or any idea, whether you're a band like Pearl Jam, right? Like, I'm a very big Pearl Jam collector, Joe. I got some really cool memorabilia. I have a Rink Roink CD, which if you know, 91, when 10 was being created, they were handing out these CDs to radio stations, which was the original copy of 10, and Eddie Vedder and Jeff Ament wrote on it. And I have one of them. Right. But the point of the matter is even a big band like Pearl Jam started somewhere having to give their music out, having to give out free t-shirts, having to create awareness for their music. And so, but at some point people started coming to them. And that's kind of where that mentality turned to me. Like, maybe I am onto something. Maybe I am not just spinning my wheels, both on the mental health side of things and on the fundraising side of things, because now it's creating a life for me. Most importantly, that allows me to be healthier mentally, more present for my kids, and happier in so many respects of my life.
Sitting here thinking about my Mookie Blaylock poster that I have.
Yeah.
So I have some sort of again, we could sit around and talk about Mother Love Bone. We could talk about Green River. We could talk about the whole inception of the band and stuff like that. This is going to be probably hard as heck to ask you, but I'm going to do it anyways. Is there, I'm sure you have many, but if we can just try to concentrate on one or two, but is there somebody that, you can think of that you've realized that you've helped along the way? And I imagine there's got to be so many, but just someone that you realize that if they hadn't met you, they probably wouldn't be maybe where they're at today because of all the love and support that you're able to provide them?
Gosh, first off, what I'll say is I've been told that, right? I've been told that. That's not to say that I believe I'm the reason, right? Or to say that without me, this person wouldn't have done X, Y, or Z, right? Sure. What I'm suggesting is first off, because of how active I am on social media in many regards, both on LinkedIn and Instagram, sharing my story often in a way that's relatable, I hope to be at least, and doing so that is also empowering and encouraging, right? I've had so many messages from perfect strangers on social media saying, thank you for doing what you're doing. It's allowed me to go to therapy. It has prompted me to come to terms with this with my dad, or whatever the case may be, right? So I have proof in that, which is a proof of concept from a business perspective, right? But more importantly, it's impacting lives. which has been the goal, right? We've always said all three of us, Todd, Vanetta, and I, we're just doing this to help one person. It just turns out that it happens to be that more people may be helped because of it. And so great. But I don't ever think it, if not for me or because of me, I think with me, right? Or alongside of me. And, having friends now who have both succeeded in their mental health struggles and overcoming them or persevering through them, or at least recognizing them and getting the help they need to be the best version of themselves. But I've also had one of my best friends take his own life in the last year. And I've had a first cousin take his own life in the last year. And so it would be very foolish of me to think that I'm helping all these people with not understanding that I can't help everybody so much as so in my own personal circle. And so it's very humbling in that regard. But because what I'll say, Joe, and many people who kind of do what it is I do, and maybe you would attest to this in your own respect and sharing your own stories, some of it is very selfish, right? Some of it is because it's on my mind and because my experiences often weighs very heavily on me. If I don't have conversations about it at times, or if I don't have an outlet, whether it's therapeutic via therapy or having great conversations like this on a podcast, right? Like, who knows where I'd be? And so it's sometimes, another great friend of mine who does mental health advocacy, Jim Maley, the Maley way, he's awesome. He says, share selfishly. And like, how beautifully is that, right? Like, share your story. It'll help others, but it's also selfish in nature because it helps keep you alive in respect because you're not bottling that up. Like I was doing, when I was just kind of struggling through my PTSD, as opposed to being willing to go to therapy or maybe take medication when I needed it most. I just kind of harnessed it. And it really made me into somebody I never wanted to be or I never was.
I believe very strongly in, I'm going to reference another movie to you, man, but there's a movie called Pay It Forward. And regardless of the actual movie itself, the concept behind it is if you can, help three random strangers and then they can help three random strangers, like you can just kind of affect the world in such a positive way. And what you're doing, and I'm really glad that you actually answered the way you answered it. And I didn't expect anything less from you. But it's with everything that we do, if we can just if we can try to create safe spaces for folks, if we can try to make people feel comfortable, if we can try to allow people to be able to open up if possible, and if we can point them in the right direction to support that's out there, I think we're helping change the world in a better place. We're helping do the right thing. I'm been so honored to sit down here and talk to you. I'm going to take you up on that. I would love to meet you in the near future.
Let's do it.
Once they get that drummer, let's go out and break bread and enjoy some jams, man. But I really mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you so much for your honesty. Thanks you so much for your transparency. Thank you so much for just being your authentic self and really kind of showing people what it's like to really stand up out of the darkness sometimes and to really kind of see the light. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's an honor to have you share your platform with me. And like you said, and I just want to reiterate and say, had a person like Todd Blyleven not reached out to me just 2 days after my experience to disclose what it is he went through and how he persevered, who knows where I'd be. And so to your point, reaching out, asking how people are doing, trying to find ways to relate to them and let them know, as you said earlier on in the show, they're not alone, can make the world a difference. And so being able to share my story here on your show is just another form of that. So I just can't thank you enough.
Awesome. Well, brother, you have a great day, man. I really, really had a great time talking to you. You have an awesome day, brother.
So did I, man. Walk tall.
You got it.